I have your attention, please. The show starts in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Salaam Alaikum. Mr. Moderator, our distinguished guests, brothers and sisters, our friends and our enemies.
Islam Rasulullah, or ba'd, in the name of Allah, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon His last and final messenger. Family, friends, foes, haters, and hateettes, welcome back to the Feachaz. I greet you all in peace and love with no hatred in my heart. And before we begin, please like, please subscribe, and please share. As you know, we got a lot of haters up in here. And today's show, I came across this story on African Diaspora channel, and we talked about this particular issue many times on this channel, at least 4 or 5 times, about how these alleged terrorist organizations are Western creations. It is nothing new. It is something from the strategies of the colonizers that they have been doing in Africa for the better part of almost a century. And just because you just heard about it, don't mean they ain't been doing it. Well, it just came out that Boko Haram, which we already knew anyways, was a Western creation. And we called this out, I think, sometime last year. Allegedly, Boko Haram is the brainchild of France, which was quite that was a surprising part for me, because Nigeria, as you know, is a like a kind of like a Western type calling, like, you know, in England, mostly states. The states right now, they have their corporations out in Nigeria and whatnot. So to hear that France was involved in the nation building in Nigeria, that was kind of shocking to me. That was very, very shocking to me. Okay, that was the only thing that was shocking to me. Not that a Western country was involved, but we are going to go deep with this particular story, because we are going to make an argument here today with how these colonizers have been doing this stuff for, like I said, a long, long time. We're going to bring a hell of receipts. And when these folks demand that Muslims denounce terrorism, Muslims seriously need to step back and answer those charges appropriately. I can't think of a single alleged terrorist organization that is grassroots. I can't think of a single one off the top of my head. Not one. All of them, without exception, that I know of, have been Western creations. And then they turn around, they arm these groups, they give them training, and turn around and say the Muslims are doing it, so that the Muslims will give access to the enemy into their countries for protection. And when the enemy comes in these countries, the alleged terrorist groups always seem to get stronger. They never seem to dwindle or get weaker or anything like that. We've seen it with whatchamacallit, Al-Qaeda. Remember, we said there was no such thing as no Al-Qaeda until after 9/11. We've seen it with ISIS, where there's a massive scandal of the weapons being shipped to ISIS soldiers from the States through Turkey. We already called out Boko Haram, but this particular story right here, because of what's going on in Africa right now with these African nations, large Muslim majority countries, including Nigeria, large Muslim majority country, Niger, large Muslim population, Burkina Faso, large Muslim population, Mali, large Muslim population, Guinea, a large Muslim population. All of them are breaking away from the claws of these colonial powers. All of them. So we're going to get real deep tonight. Okay. I'm going to show you some stuff. First, we're going to get into this video. Let me just pull it up here. Like, subscribe, share, hit me up on Patreon. Wa alaikum salam, brother Abu Aramia. 1 second, y'all. We got this going on. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, brother Abu Aramia. Family, this is going to get real deep, okay? So hold on to your horses. Let's play this now. 1 second, y'all. Let me cue this up.
Previous president. In Nigeria.
One second, y'all. Sorry, I didn't share the video. Oh, I'm tripping. 1 second, y'all. Let me get it up on the screen. 1 second, y'all. Let me put it up here. There we go. Okay, so let's play this back for you, okay?
The white supremacists have been a France has been a menace to West Africa, and really the white supremacists have been a menace ever since his existence when it comes to definitely black people. And during the time of the president Buhari out there in Nigeria, which is the previous president before the new puppet president that was actually put in, there had some, sisters talking about, France and what they have caused in Nigeria, because remember, Mali has said that France is the one that caused and created Boko Haram in Nigeria. Let's roll that.
So the message could be relayed to the French authorities wherever they are in France that Nigeria is indeed a sovereign country, and as such, any form or attempt to compromise our territorial integrity will be resisted wholeheartedly. At this point, I want to stress, Nigeria was not colonized by France. Therefore, they have no business coming to toy with our lives here. We are aware that some vested interest was not happy with the gains made by the Nigerian government and especially our dear President Muhammad Buhari, in the fight against terrorism. As such, they began providing logistic support under a cover called humanitarian whatever to the Boko Haram fighters. They also assumed the role of the mouthpiece of the Boko Haram terrorist group. They use their state medium to promote their nefarious activities and to give them the needed psychological boost, claiming human rights for people that have been raised trying to kill fellow Nigerians by them. The movement against slavery and terrorism wishes to state categorically and on unequivocal terms that France is indeed responsible for the resurgence of Boko Haram attacks in Nigeria. The movement against slavery and terrorism wishes to inform the president of France.
In case y'all missed that, let's do that one more again. Right now, if y'all remember, even Mali accused France of the same tactics. Since France came into their countries to fight terrorism, terrorism increased. Niger accused France of the same nonsense. The same accusations were held against the United States in Turkey with ISIS, Islamic State in Turkey. This is from their tactics. Don't let these folks try to pass the buck of terrorism on Muslims. The real backers and funders and supporters of terrorism with armaments and logistics and even propaganda is the West. These Western countries. And they do this, it's a very old tactic, they do this so they can have an excuse to enter in these countries to control the people and its resources. Don't allow these folks to paint Muslims as terrorists. They are the terrorists. They have always been the terrorist. Did we not cover last week these same folks that want to talk about terrorism? Did we not cover last week how they gave Tunisia 1 billion euros to make sure that Black Africans don't go into the Mediterranean Sea to get to their countries, but rather get kidnapped and sent right back to Libya, where they can be enslaved and tortured and forced into prostitution? Do we not cover this? So you want to colonize these countries. You want to loot all the wealth out of these countries. You want to make sure that the people are in a perpetual state of poverty, so their only motivation is to work to survive, so that you can continue to loot the resources out of these countries, the wealth out of these countries. And then when these same folks in which you have forced them to speak your language try to escape to your country, you sink their boats and call it an accident. How are you going to have thousands and thousands and thousands of people drowning in the Mediterranean Sea, and they are all accidents within just a couple of years? Y'all are tripping. You make sure that these countries are filled with violence, then you blame the Muslims. And then you have, because you do this through propaganda, all these non-Muslims continue to repeat your rotten and dirty talking points. And those Muslims who don't know, they don't have no answer for you, right? Alhamdulillah for the Black grassroots. Alhamdulillah for the Black Muslim grassroots, because we got your answers right here. I wish a biscuit would. I wish a biscuit would. Don't come around here playing that nonsense. We will let you know anytime one of these biscuits demands that you denounce terrorism, the only response that you need to be saying, sure, right after you first. Will you denounce how you have terrorized Iraq, how you have terrorized Iran, how you have terrorized Afghanistan, how you have terrorized Somalia? Will you denounce that first? Right after you. How you have terrorized Yemen? How you have terrorized Nigeria? Will you denounce that? Turkey? You name it. The fight against terrorism. More like the fight to line their pockets with the blood of darker skinned people in order to make sure these governments keep a steady flow of cash in the coffers of the military industrial complex. Fight against terrorism. Fight against terrorism, my big brown backside. The locals themselves will do a better job of fighting the terrorism that they created. Anyways, we're going right now. Sorry, I went off on a big tangent there. Let me go back a bit, y'all.
France is indeed responsible for the resurgence of Boko Haram attacks.
France is indeed responsible for the resurgence of Boko Haram. France, all the way in Nigeria too. Y'all don't know this enemy. Didn't last week France do a abaya ban? Why do you think all of a sudden they want to ban abayas? It's just like that. Last year, a year or two ago, they banned niqabs. Then they started banning imams, even deporting their imams. Then they started banning massage. Now they're banning abayas in France. You seriously think they are worried about Islamic terrorism in France? Is that what you think it is? They ain't worried about that. It's because they bombed out and depleted these Muslim countries so much that the Muslims are flooding into France. And it's changing the demographic of France and having a big, huge effect on the culture of the French people. So much so that last year, when a young black Muslim boy was assassinated by the police, it caused riots in the country. Riots. They ain't ever seen nothing like that before. That's what they worried about. The inventors and maintainers and the sustainers of racism are losing a grip on those who they have classified to be the permanent bottom rail of the racist caste system. That is black people. That's why they are now attacking abaya. Not because they are worried about some woman running around in the streets of France strapping a bomb to herself somewhere. They ain't worried about that. Let's be crystal clear. They ain't worried about that. France has been taking L's in their colonies hard for the last 5 years. Look what happened in Lebanon with that massive explosion. Look at what happened with the Arab Spring after the post-Arab Spring in Algeria. The only colony that is twisting and twirling and twerking and twitching and still bending over backwards to have their nose firmly planted up of their Zadie Macron's backside is Tunisia. Black Africa ain't having it no more. Nigeria ain't even a colony of France. They don't want the French in their country. According to the Niger military, France is building up their military and neighboring countries to invade because Niger is demanding the French military to leave the country, says royal generals. Of course, the stakes are very, very, very high. But they will not get any support from the Africans. Even the African leadership is shaking in their boots right now. The Nigerian leadership is shaking in his boots. The Cameroonian leadership shaking in their boots. Because the writing is on the wall for colonialism. All the French colonies, except for Tunisia, and latently, you can say the Arab colonies. Latently, like Algeria, like Morocco. But Algeria even told France, you are not putting your military here to try to attack Niger. You're not doing it. Algeria told them that. The stakes are very, very, very high. So anyways, let's keep listening to this, y'all.
In Nigeria, the movement against slavery and terrorism wishes to inform the president of France, Emmanuel Macron, that the world is indeed watching closely, and we, especially Nigerians, are also watching very closely. And should the French authorities not halt the spread of terrorism in Nigeria, the day of reckoning is indeed near, and very, very near. We are also aware that the actions of France are hinged on economic benefits, given the avalanche of economic resources in northeast Nigeria, particularly the Lake Chad Basin region. This is indeed an attempt at recolonization. What did I say? It is another attempt at recolonization by France after we have been colonized by Britain. We are not under France, and we will not allow for France to come and colonize us again by violence, which by all standards is quarrel and won't stand the test of time because Nigerians will resist every move with passion. Let me pause here and give you one statistics. In March 2008, listen to this quote and please put it on record and on your medium. Without Africa, France will slide down into the rank of 23rd power of the world. That is, quote and unquote, former French president Jacques Chirac. Another quote and unquote, without Africa.
Jacques Chirac said that. Most of y'all might even remember Jacques Chirac. Right? If you're older, you know exactly who Jacques Chirac is.
France will have no history in the 21st century by Francois Mitterrand. This was a prophecy given in 1957. Now, I want to digress a little bit. In 14 African countries are obliged by France through the colonial pact to put 85% of their reserves in the central bank of France. That is not enough for them. Under the French Ministry of Finance, in 2014, Togo and 13 other African countries still have to pay the colonial debt, which they do not owe, to France. African leaders who refuse to pay are either killed or victims of coup d'etat. And
Exactly. And we said it before, we're going to say it again. The assassination of Patrice Lumumba is probably the most important assassination in post-World War II history. Because that assassination was the blueprint that set the tone to assassinate the leaders of Africans and South Americans all over the world and throughout the decades. So now what is happening is Western Black Africa has finally risen up, and they are making us very proud. When the Nigerians, what is that? The African Union, I can't remember. Maybe somebody can put it in the chat for me. But the African Union, right? When they said they demanded that Niger relinquished what's the army there? Hutu army, I think it is. Relinquish their power and reinstate their president there in Niger. It was the Nigerian people, because they have this president in Nigeria, Bola Ahmed Tinubu. When he became president, it caused massive protests last year. Massive protest. Because this is a man who relinquishes all kinds of autonomy of the people in favor for colonizers. The people did not want this guy. But he was imposed on the people. So he's running around pretending like he's running things. And now even he is scared. Y'all hearing me? He just became president, okay? He tried to rally his army, and the soldiers in Nigeria showed support for the Nigerians. The soldiers in Nigeria showed support for the Nigerians openly. And the people are speaking with one voice, while those who acquiesce to the powers that be are speaking with the voices of their European colonial masters. There's a change coming. Let's keep watching this video, y'all.
Those who obey these oppressive conditions are supported and rewarded with a lifetime rulership and not leadership of their people. This strangulating colonial system offers France, please put it on record, a cash of about 500 billion US dollars. I mean 500 billion US dollars year in, year out, which they now in turn use to purchase weapons of destruction for fellow Africans and especially Nigerians, for us to begin to kill one another. This is unacceptable to us. It is no longer tolerable. We will not accept it. And in the case for Nigerians to kill Nigerians, we say no to this. We say no.
That is the cycle of democracy in Africa and pretty much the global South. Wherever, the white supremacist goes, that is what they export. That is the democracy that they export. The democracy that they export is to make sure those people who are willing and ready to curry up favor and ingratiate them with the gifts and the spoils of the resources that are underneath their feet in their countries, just give it away. Those folks are in power. Then they take those resources and sell them on the free market through capitalism in their countries, meaning the European and the Western countries. They use technology to build weapons. Those weapons, when they get old and rusty and dusty, they arm rival factions all over Africa to make sure all these African countries are in a perpetual state of destabilization in order to make sure that these countries remain underdeveloped and undeveloped so that the people who are a human resource can remain slaves in their countries, and the cycle continues. And the cycle continues. And then the whole world has that nerve to ask, why is Africa poor? Africa is not poor. Africa has never been poor. How can the richest man in history, one of our ancestors, Mansa Musa, be the richest man in history out of the very same place they're at in Africa, which caused Europeans to leave Europe to come to Africa to begin with, but yet Africa today is poor? It's because these people are thieves. If somebody come into your house every single day to steal whatever is in your house every day, would it look like somebody who not in your house talking about why are you poor? What does that look like? Let's keep watching. Let's let this ride out, y'all. 1 second.
You cannot continue to use money from Africa to buy weapons, arms, and ammunition for Nigerians and other African countries to kill themselves. We said no. I said we said no. We said no. We said no. The movement against slavery is also calling on United Nations to investigate the role of France in the spread of terrorism in Nigeria and the whole of Africa. France must also stop the sale of...
The United Nations are brothers to one another. They are aiders and brothers to one another. The United Nations has never, ever, ever done anything to help any African country, ever. Those folks are there to make sure that the show must go on, that the wool is perpetually pulled over your eyes. And when I say wool, I don't just mean just the wool. I mean the whole stankin' flock of sheep is pulled over your eyes, okay? The United Nations is there to make sure that European countries remain rich, and African and Asian dark-skinned countries and South American countries remain poor. Let me read something for you from this book here. All right, this is Confessions of an Economic Hitman. Okay? Written by John Perkins. This one right here, okay? He's talking about a situation that happened with the World Bank and FIFA, okay? This is the World Bank and FIFA, okay? Listen to this, all right? I'm going to tie it into how it matches with what's going on in Africa, right? Okay, so the soccer scandal was smoke and mirrors diversion. Media attention focused on non-essential aspect of life, sports, at a time when the real criminals were stealing the global economy. Individual FIFA officials were carted off in handcuffs while bank executives rewarded themselves with multi-million-dollar bonuses. Why were individual bank officers whose admitted crimes affected all of us not indicted? The obvious answer is that the bankers are members of the corporatocracy, whereas FIFA officials are not. The story is Justice Department had uncovered so much wrongdoing among the FIFA people and was aggressively pursuing indictments diverted attention from the bigger story. The banking lobby unduly influences the Justice Department. Banks are so wealthy and powerful that they can buy our elected officials and regulators who serve us, and the media is supposed to keep us informed. I found myself once again thinking about Howard Zinn and he and I discussed the growing power of lobbyists. We vote, he said, but those who we elect don't seem to listen to us anymore. They obey the commands of the people who finance their campaigns, corporate lobbyists. He pointed out that I'd done something similar. You obeyed the World Bank, he paused. Did you really think the World Bank wanted to end poverty? Did you really think the World Bank wanted to end poverty? Do you see how this is connected? Those folks are voting for people who say that their interest is for the people, but their interest is for some banker somewhere in some other country or some corporation somewhere in some other country. So they serve them while their own people suffer. This is the job of the World Bank. This is the job of the UN. And this is the job of the IMF. It's a scam. And it's been a long time coming. You know, Allah says in the Quran that He declares war on those who deal with interest. That's these folks. Because the people are enslaved because of interest-based banking and loans made to these countries by the IMF under the guise of aid. So when the US and France has started threatening these countries that we will rescind our aid, these countries told them, keep your aid. Keep it. We don't need it. Furthermore, the painting of Muslims as terroristic and violent and force converting is an old tactic of these colonizers. They've been doing this since they tried to make the Ottoman Empire fall, even before. Because when they went into Africa, this is a tactic that they use even during colonial times to try to divide Africans from Africans. Okay, so if you look at this book, it's Defining Legends. Defining Legends. We're going to read from this book here. Right, I'm going to quote you something that Ivan van Sertima said, right, and it's quoted in this book. If you don't know who Dr. Ivan van Sertima is, look him up. He is a very famous, world-renowned, what's that science called again? What's the science called again, man? I'm getting old, man. When you study not historian, when you study like artifacts and these type of things. Anyways, I forget the name of the science, right? But he wrote a book, a very famous book called Before Columbus Came, proving that Africans were in the West before Columbus, not a few years, long before Columbus, and trading with the indigenous people of the West. Okay, that's probably his most not archaeology, anthropology. Thank you, Dr. Longstaff. It's anthropology. He's an anthropologist. Okay, world famous anthropologist from Guyana, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so Dr. Ivan van Sertima, a well-known non-Muslim historian, has noted that. I think that it should also be pointed out, contrary to myths about the Muslims. Okay, he's not Muslim, okay, and he's world famous, okay. He said, I think it should be pointed out, contrary to the myths about Muslims, that they did not force their religion down the throats of Christians. And we have been given no evidence that this changed dramatically in later Muslim dynasties. But if you go throughout Africa, the Africans believe that the Muslims were forcing Africans to become Muslims. And they also believe that it's the Arabs that forced Africans to become Muslim through slavery without any proof. Where did they get this from? They got this from the European Orientalist. You see how all of this is connected? The same European Orientalist that said that Muslims force converted Africans can be seen in modern times as the post-colonial fighters against terrorism. My, oh my, even though the times have changed, the strategies have not. The times have changed, but the strategies have not. I'll give you another one. 1 second here. Okay, so this is another quote from the same book. Okay. Not quite Venus from the ways, the Almoravid conquest of Africa and the modern historiography of Africa, they state, similarly, there's no direct evidence for any conquest, still less a violent and destructive conquest of Ghana by the Almoravids. The conquest hypothesis is a European creation. You know what else is a European creation? Boko Haram. Who created Al Qaeda? White folks. Who created ISIS? White folks. Who created Boko Haram? White folks. Don't let these people play you. Don't let these people fool you at all. Let's keep watching, y'all.
Of arms and ammunition to the Boko Haram terrorist groups in the interest of peace and tranquility. That is what we need for us to progress and succeed. This is on the heels that the bulk of the French NGOs operating in Northeast Nigeria are carrying out espionage activities and passing the same to the leadership of the Boko Haram terrorist groups on the instruction of French authorities because of their business interests.
What you're seeing right now.
Okay. Family, we have talked about this time and time again, that the strategy of terrorism is to put you on your heels. You have to understand how the white supremacists, they think, okay? They think in terms of winning and ruling. They don't think in terms of human nature or human development. You're talking about some real wicked, evil people. These are wicked, wicked, evil people. So in order to keep their games going, they have to have you on your heels. They play strictly offense. You are all the ones who are always reacting to the things that they are doing. Do y'all remember 9/11? After 9/11 happened, they put out a 10,000-page report, these same white supremacists who brought you 18 Saudis, hijacked these planes, And even on the planes disintegrated inside of these buildings, somehow by some miracle, they found one of their passports at ground zero. If you're too young to remember, I'm going to tell you. All of this is true. They actually said this on the news, on the actual news, live while it was happening. Because I remember this very clearly because I was watching it too, okay, while it was happening. Right? And I saw this with my own eyes, and many of y'all saw it with your own eyes too. The reporter was reporting on Building 7 collapsing. Building 7 didn't get hit by anything. No plane, nothing. Just some debris. And Building 7, she's reporting that Building 7 is collapsing, or collapsed rather. She's saying it live on news. Meanwhile, Building 7 is behind her. While she's saying the Building 7 is collapsed, and she's talking, suddenly Building 7 actually collapsed while she was talking about it. You need to talk to some of the older brothers, because some of the older brothers have this stuff downloaded and saved on their hard drives, because you will not find it on the internet at all. If you do, you are very lucky. But most of the stuff has been wiped clean from the internet. The Saudi 18 have all been found alive in Saudi Arabia. Imagine that. Imagine that. The Saudi 18, all of them found alive in Saudi Arabia. $10,000 pages, and only 3 buildings in history have ever collapsed due to fire. The Twin Towers and Building 7. And Building 7 wasn't hit by no plane. And who did they blame for these terrorist attacks? Somebody put it in the chat, please. Somebody put it in the chat, please. Who did they blame for these terrorist attacks? And after they blamed who they blamed for these terrorist attacks, we saw beards getting shaved, thobes coming off, abayas flying off, hijabs getting shorter. We saw all of that. We saw all of that because y'all believe your enemy. Y'all believe your enemy. Then, after they blamed who they blamed, they put certain laws in place, like the Patriot Act, which usurped the freedoms of Americans. But not just Americans. The Patriot Act usurped the freedoms of everybody internationally. They used this event, this false flag event, to make sure nobody can get no freedom, but particularly and especially the Muslims. And so, even here in Canada, mosque couldn't operate like the good old days. They couldn't just say anything. They were heavily monitored. And if you invited certain imams to your mosque, like Dr. Bilal Phillips, you would lose your charitable status. Family, is Dr. Bilal Phillips a terrorist? Yes or no? Is Dr. Bilal Phillips a terrorist? Yes or no? Dr. Bilal Phillips? That man is a terrorist? Earthy Nomad, not one bit. Sister Tika, no. But yet still, your masjids, I believe is in Africa right now, are towing the line because they do not want to lose their charitable status. You get it? You see how the game is played? These are not people who are looking to exist and coexist in a civil manner. They're looking to control you. And they will do what it takes to control you. Bilal Phillips, the terrorist. That man? Who believes that? Then we saw an element that we didn't see before 9/11. It started coming out the woodworks. We saw, and we still see, since that time, the bravado of a segment of Sufis who are inclined to work with non-Muslim governments to stop the spread of what they call Wahhabis. Who are the Wahhabis? It's me and you, the Salafis, okay? We're the Wahhabis. Us. Go look, just look up Hamza Yusuf and is aligning himself with the Trump administration. You can't make this stuff up. Those of us who are from the 90s, we used to listen to Hamza Yusuf. He had some fiery speeches back in the day. Listen to his speeches now. Night and day. They have arrested time and time and time and time again Muslims who ain't got anything to do with anything, sending them to Guantanamo Bay, torturing them, many of them being murdered in prison under torturous conditions. Many of them. We had a live a couple of weeks ago about how 3 black Muslims were set up by the US government from a Pakistani spook and entrapped in an alleged made-up terrorist plot. There was no terrorism going on. They were entrapped. Don't let these people trick you. They are the real terrorists. They are the real terrorists. Y'all remember Madeleine Albright when she said that the sanctions that killed 500,000 children in Iraq were justified? May she rot in hell. I mean, that is justice. But their false flags against their own people, and then they blame you for it, is terrorism. This is a copy-paste system. It's a copy-paste system. But you Muslims, y'all are the ones who need to grow a backbone. Your priorities are skewed. You want to be near whiteness. You will do anything to be near whiteness because you've been tricked. You seriously think that success is in getting the education of your enemies. And you have two choices today. Either you're going to learn or you're going to learn. Okay? There is no other third choice. Y'all are here because the same people that you love so much destroyed your countries. That's why you're here. And they don't want you no more. You don't know them like we know. Us, the descendants of slaves, we know these folks very well. We know how they think. We know very well the wickedness of their plots. We're not worried about losing our visas, our citizenships. We ain't worried about that. We're telling you the truth. Why we got to be worried about that? So now that we know that another one of these so-called terrorist groups made up by the West, don't let these non-Muslims put terrorism on you. Whenever they ask you, you always say, okay, you first. And you break it down to them, okay? Thanks for everybody who joined me tonight. I came to you in peace. I leave you in peace. Assalamu alaikum. Rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We'll see you guys tomorrow, inshallah.